Alright, let's talk about Blink-182's California Deluxe Edition. Now, this album, or I don't know what you really want to call it, because they're calling it a deluxe edition of the already released California, and you can check out my thoughts on the original album. I have the review up on my channel, but they're calling it a deluxe edition, but it's almost its own thing. It comes with a complete second disc that includes, it's basically a full-length album in its own right, but they're basically just B-sides that didn't make it onto the actual album itself of California. So it's kind of hard to describe it, as well as to kind of give a real opinion as far as whether it's worth it or not to give it a listen. But as far as, like I said, if you want to hear what I thought about the original album California, go ahead and check out my thoughts on the original review itself that's on the channel. Now, as far as this goes, I mean, I kind of feel like it was unnecessary. It's kind of cool to give fans an extra bonus, thing, but that's usually done without this fanfare that they're doing. I mean, it's usually a deluxe edition of an album that comes out, and it usually comes out with the album itself, and you buy, the deluxe edition, you get a few extra songs, but here they're kind of releasing it as its own thing, and the reason why I say I feel it's kind of unnecessary is because the songs themselves are, I mean, they're left off the album, and they could have remained left off. I mean, I could see why they weren't on the actual album itself. There's a few in there that are definitely worth it to check out, especially if you did like California. If you didn't like California, there's no point in even talking about it. I mean, you're not going to like anything that's on here, so why even bother? The problem with most of these songs here is that they're just kind of boring. I mean, there's no real hook or catchiness to them. They try. There's definitely some choruses in there. The opening track, Parking Lot, for instance, has some pretty interesting chorus going on. Misery's another one, but it doesn't really grab you like some of the songs that are actually on California do. The instrumentals on there are interesting enough, but they kind of just fail to stick. They're really just boring songs overall. They really just pass over you, and you really kind of forget them. But they're not bad necessarily. They're okay. There wasn't any reason that they needed to be put out this way, I guess. I mean, it would have been cool to see them as actual deluxe edition released alongside the album and included a few of these tracks, but it really wasn't necessary to do it in this way as far as releasing a completely new, with all this fanfare. They're kind of calling it a new album, and it's not. I mean, the second disc, if they wanted to release it as California Part 2, they could have, and I'd probably be doing a little bit different of a review right now, but that's a completely different story. There is a nice track on here. It's kind of a bit surprising, called Wildfire, that sounds like it was ripped right off of Take Off Your Pants and Jacket, from the guitar chord itself to the actual song structure. It really kind of has that throwback kind of pop punk feel that they were doing during those era of Take Off Your Pants and Jacket, 2001, 2099, that whole area. The rest of the songs on there take a very much darker and kind of more somber tone overall. They're trying to hit this emotional chord, and most of them kind of fail to do so. The track 6/8, 6/8, whatever you want to call it, does work. I didn't like it when it first came out, but it's kind of grown on me a little bit. It's much more in the style of a kind of an edgy hard rock song. And it's kind of in the same style almost as Los Angeles off of the first California, the original California. Now, that kind of surprised me as much as I like that song, because it's so different from things that they really have done in the past and done ever, even on that album. One of the reasons, the song Bottom of the Ocean is another one that kind of does that same thing, kind of switches things up a little bit, does keep it interesting at least, but overall, just the songs that are on here really are just, there's nothing there to kind of bring you to this. If you already own California, if you've already listened to California, I mean, it really depends on how into that album and how into Blink-182 you are, as far as whether or not it's worth checking out. If you like that album, if you are into Blink-182, it's definitely worth it, I would say, but there's nothing here that's going to make you upset if you never heard it. You know, if for instance, if this album suddenly got pulled for some reason and then disappeared, there's no reason to go searching it out. There's just nothing there. And then we have to talk about the song on there called I Can't Get You Any More Pregnant, which just like off of Virgil California with Bohemian Rhapsody, it's why at this point, I mean, we're talking about these 40-year-old musicians that are, you know, adults, they have kids themselves, and it just feels like this desperate cry for attention, and kind of this desperate cry for, hey, look, we're still doing the same thing, we're still the same guys we always were, and look at it. And the unfortunate thing is that it doesn't come out in their music itself, except here and there, you definitely kind of hear it. It just feels like such a forced attempt at doing that, and it doesn't really work, and it comes off as just being kind of sad. I mean, I wouldn't even mind this if this was something that they did as an interlude within their shows. I mean, that would still be kind of humorous, I guess, but to put it in actually record it, put it on an album, and actually put it out there at this point, and especially the fact that they already did it with the original California, and now they're doing another song on California Part 2, we'll call it. It just doesn't really work for me, and it kind of just, again, it just comes off as sad at this point, and really just as a desperate attempt. So overall, I mean, if we're reviewing it as a whole album, as if I never reviewed California in the first place, I would say definitely the first half is stronger. That none of these songs on the second part of it really make it worth getting into or buying again. I mean, it's cool that at least that they again didn't try to release this as a separate album on its own. I think it really would have done a lot worse, at least that they're including it and calling it a deluxe edition of California. But just, it really just doesn't do a whole lot. And I mean, I liked California. I know a lot of people were really mixed on that. I liked it. I still like it today. I mean, it's not the greatest thing that they've ever put out, but it really felt like they were kind of back to being a cohesive band, and they were actually back to being musicians that wanted to be making music instead of a drummer, a bassist, and some guy who literally phoned it in. You know, they actually feel like a whole band, and it feels like everybody's contributing. And even the songs on here, they still feel like that. It's just that overall, it really wasn't necessarily needed to for any reason on here. But again, and then again, it's kind of cool to get to hear the B-sides and stuff like that. So I'm a little torn as far as how exactly I feel on it. What I will say is, if you didn't like California, you're not going to like these songs. If you like Blink-182, it's worth checking out, but you're probably not going to find anything on here that's necessarily worthwhile. Thank you so much for watching the video review of California Deluxe Edition from Blink-182. Don't forget to leave your comments down below about what you thought about how they released this, what you thought about the original album, the additional songs, whatever you want to hear from me next. I always love to hear from you all. So leave a comment down below, like this video, and subscribe to the channel for more.